Coming up in our newscast, the nation's daily COVID-19 tally exceeds 100,000. Authorities ease business curfew slightly and wants people with few or no symptoms to be treated at home. Ukrainian government forces and Russian-backed rebels trade fresh accusations of shelling and other ceasefire violations. As tensions continue to escalate, the developments could impact South Korean importers and exporters. The two main South Korean presidential candidates hit their respective traditional strongholds. This while Justice Party's nominee targets the working class and People's Party's Ahn Cheol-soo plans to resume campaigning this weekend. Hello, hope you're wrapping up the week well. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. South Korea reported more than 100,000 new COVID-19 cases. Still, with severe cases relatively low, authorities changed distancing rules so that select establishments can stay open longer. Shin Yeon starts us off.
The number of new infections that South Korea added on Friday hit 109,831. This is an increase of more than 55,000 from a week ago. Just 3 weeks after daily infections hit the 10,000 range for the first time, numbers have gone up tenfold. The number of critically ill patients has been hovering in the 300 range for 4 consecutive days. But there's expected to be up to 2,500 critical cases by early next month. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister announced in a briefing on Friday how the country will roll out social distancing measures from this weekend. Unlike what authorities had reportedly been planning, social gathering caps will stay at a maximum of 6 people. The only change is that business operating hours will be extended from the 9 p.m. curfew to 10 p.m.
We've decided to maintain the current framework of social distancing, but slightly adjust some measures in consideration of people's livelihood and our medical capacity.
The new measures will last for 3 weeks starting tomorrow. In regards to vaccine passes, the Prime Minister said they'll be used at most facilities for now, but could be reviewed. Also from Saturday, QR codes will only be used to check vaccine passes instead of being used as entry logs. The government has decided to no longer track where people visit. Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum also said the government's decision to extend vaccine passes to the 12 to 18 age group from March will be postponed until April 1st. The Prime Minister added that authorities would ease social distancing measures further once the surge is contained.
According to experts, we may see Omicron peak by the end of February or mid-March. After that, we'll see Omicron cases go down and then be able to ease social distancing measures like other countries have so that people can return to normal life.
For this to happen, he asked more people to get their booster shots. He noted that unlike other countries, South Korea hasn't seen a drastic increase in deaths and critically ill patients amid Omicron. That's because Korea has administered the third vaccine shot to more than half of its population. From next Monday, those over 18 who haven't been fully vaccinated can reserve their Novavax shots, which will then be first administered from March 7th. These vaccines will also be used as boosters and mix-and-match shots. From Monday, authorities will also expand the age group that can take Paxlovid to those aged 40 and up who have underlying conditions. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
The partial easing of antivirus measures is met with controversy among select groups, including medical experts. Some say it's too early. Business owners want more changes to the curfew. Cha Min-kyu sheds light on this issue.
The partial easing of social distancing rules in South Korea has sparked mixed reactions from the general public. On Friday, authorities pushed back the curfew on businesses like restaurants and cafes to 10 p.m. from the current 9 p.m., while still maintaining the private gathering cap of 6 people. Pundits say the measures are aimed at finding a balance between virus prevention and minimizing economic damage. However, one health expert believes that it is too early to be giving the impression that antivirus measures are being eased.
It's a relief that the authorities didn't make any big changes, but the fact that they are giving the impression that they are easing measures could give the public the wrong idea about the current virus situation.
Numerous experts are saying that the country has to remain extra cautious until the number of infections reaches the peak in 2 to 3 weeks, and agree that measures could be eased once that peak has passed. The easing also comes amid fears over an increasing number of severely ill patients and deaths, but another expert says the authorities should do more than just making revisions to social distancing rules.
The number of critically ill patients and deaths can increase proportionately to the increasing number of infections. The government should make better use of treatments like Paxlovid and Remdesivir.
While some medical experts believe we should wait a little longer to ease restrictions, small business owners have expressed disappointment that the government has only partially eased its measures.
Extending by 1 hour is really not enough. It should be extended to at least midnight because we need time to close up.
I personally think that the changes have been made too late. It's also disappointing for business owners because business hours have only been extended by an hour. I want to be able to open for 24 hours. At first I was worried about the virus situation, but now I'm more worried about our business.
Others expressed difficulties in adjusting to sudden changes to restrictions without much notice beforehand.
The government announced that the new measures will begin Saturday, but it's really hard for us to prepare for the sudden change of restrictions.
South Korea's Alliance of Small Business Owners says they will leave their lights on for 24 hours and hold candlelight rallies to protest against the government's measures. Cha Min-kyu, Arirang News.
A recent flare-up in Ukraine's Donbas region is escalating tensions between the U.S. and Russia. President Biden warned Moscow's invasion of the European country is imminent, while Russia rebutted the claims. Kim Jun shares with us their remarks.
Speaking at the White House on Thursday, U.S. President Joe Biden warned that Russia is ready to invade Ukraine within several days. Russia responded that the claim is false and downplayed it as hysteria. President Biden spoke as Kiev and the Kremlin blamed each other for shelling in Ukraine's eastern region of Donbas, which the West sees as a precursor for an attack by Russia on the Ukrainian border. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told the UN Security Council it would be a combined attack involving ground troops, aircraft, ships, and cyber attacks on crucial institutions. The flare-up in Donbas comes as the U.S. and NATO again argued against claims made by Russia's defense ministry on Thursday that it has pulled back some of its forces from the border after completing drills in the annexed region of Crimea to return to their base in Russia's southern region of Chechnya. The U.S. has rebutted this, saying Russia has actually increased its troop presence by about 7,000 in recent days to an estimated total of 150,000, according to Western media outlets, including the BBC.
They have not moved any of their troops out. They've moved more troops in, number one. Number two, we have reason to believe that they are engaged in a false flag operation to have an excuse to go in. Every indication we have is they're prepared to go into Ukraine, attack Ukraine.
While largely seen as ineffective in diffusing tensions, crisis talks held in Europe continue. Dubbed as one of the most critical foreign trips of her vice presidency, U.S. VP Kamala Harris leads the American delegation to a security conference held in Munich on Friday, where the focus of the talks is expected to be the heightened tensions between the U.S. and Russia over Ukraine. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korean importers and exporters are concerned about the impact of the Ukraine crisis as Russia is an important trading partner. And more broadly, the conflict would mean higher oil prices. Kim Sang-min provides a deeper analysis.
The growing tension between Russia and Ukraine could take its toll on South Korean firms, possibly causing disruption in trade. In its latest report, the Korea International Trade Association warns that any escalation in the Russia-Ukraine crisis could see Korea's exports to Russia take a direct hit. In the wake of the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2015, South Korea's exports to Russia dropped more than 53% from the previous year. Currently, Russia is South Korea's 10th largest trading partner, and the report suggests hundreds of exporters and importers in the country, especially those in cosmetics and auto parts manufacturing, could be affected. However, in the bigger picture, the impact of the tensions on South Korea as a whole in terms of trade and supply is somewhat limited. While South Korea imports more than 2,400 items from Russia and Ukraine, there are just 50 items where Korea has a more than 70% reliance on those countries. Experts point to the indirect impact, however, as it could further accelerate the already high inflation, which could in turn put a damper on businesses.
If armed conflict breaks out in Ukraine, there may be a very high rise in inflation, especially oil prices, not because Ukraine is a major oil producer, but Russian exports of oil goes through Ukraine to Europe and other countries.
Possible international boycotts against Russian oil could further push up the already high oil prices, with some analysts expecting it to hit $120 per barrel or even higher. The expert also added that prices of grain could rise globally as Ukraine is a major grain exporter to many countries, especially Europe. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
A prominent expert forecasts South Korea's economic growth this year will be lower than the consensus due to a slowdown in exports and domestic consumption. The head of global macro research at Nomura said growth will come in at around 2.1%, not the 3% estimated by the IMF and the BOK. Speaking in a webinar hosted by the Institute for Global Economics in Seoul, he attributed the trend to economic slowdown in China. Robert Subarman also highlighted that although the global economy will be near the end of the pandemic this year, the aftershocks will continue. That includes acceleration in income inequality and a decline in potential economic growth. Before heading into their first weekend on the campaign trail, the two frontrunners in South Korea's presidential race visited their respective strongholds. Ruling Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung rallied for support in the country's southwest, comparing himself to a late former president. Kim Do-yeon tells us more.
On Friday, the ruling Democratic Party of Korea's presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung held rallies at the party stronghold of Jeollanam-do province and the city of Gwangju. One of his early stops was Mokpo, the home of the late Kim Dae-jung, a popular former president from the party and a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He wooed the crowd by mentioning the late former president and by comparing him to his biggest rival, Yoon Suk-yeol of People Power Party, for Yoon's recent remarks on a possible probe if he wins the election.
Did President Kim Dae-jung ever act on or even speak of political revenge despite being persecuted all his life while practicing the spirit of unity?
He also added that he will rebuild the country's economy like the late President Kim, who took office during a major financial crisis back in 1997. Beyond recovery, he said he will deal with the issue of climate change as well as completing the process of going carbon neutral.
In a time of crisis, a courageous leader is needed. In time of crisis, a person is needed who doesn't think about personal benefits, but about the lives and safety of the citizens and the public's future.
He also mentioned the new changes to the COVID-19 prevention guidelines and the business operation hours for cafes and restaurants in particular, saying that he has been urging the government to extend them until midnight for customers who've received a booster shot. In addition, the campaign released its pledges for the region, including developing an offshore wind power industry ecosystem to lead the nation's goal of achieving carbon neutrality. He ended his rally for the day at the May 18 Democracy Square in Gwangju, a place made to remember those who died in the pro-democracy movement in the 1980s. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The main opposition People Power Party's Yoon Suk-yeol spent the day in the country's southeast. He visited the birthplace of former President Park Chung-hee, an authoritarian leader credited by many for Korea's rapid economic growth. Lee Jae-myung reports.
On day 4 of his campaign, Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party headed to the country's southeast. It was his second stop there in just 4 days, apparently seeking to cement his support in the traditionally conservative region. But there was added attention on this visit because Yoon went to Gumi, the birthplace of former conservative President Park Chung-hee, known both for his autocratic role and having led the country's rapid economic development. The last time Yoon went to Gumi 5 months ago, a group of conservative activists stopped him from entering the home where Park Chung-hee was born, because it was Yoon who led the impeachment of Park's daughter, former President Park Geun-hye. This time, however, he did go in, and he said he will follow the example of what he called Park's socio-economic revolution. Later, in an appeal to the voters of Gumi, whose city benefited greatly from Park's industrial projects, Yoon vowed to recreate that revolution.
President Park Chung-hee designated Gumi as an industrial complex, making the city the industrial hub in textiles, machinery, electricity, and electronics. I will recreate that glorious age.
Yoon also stopped in Daegu, the hometown of ex-President Park Geun-hye, who is said to be discharged from hospital after having been pardoned earlier this year. Throughout his campaign, Yoon has consistently emphasized that this election should be about punishing the current government for what he says are its corruption scandals and policy failures.
I urge all of you in Gyeongsang-buk-do province to come together and bring strict justice to this Democratic Party that has nominated a person who is at the center of a massive corruption scandal.
Yoon will continue his campaign in the southeast on Saturday. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Sang-jung of the Justice Party headed to Pohang and criticized a major steelmaker for deciding to set up a holding company in the capital. Meanwhile, People's Party presidential nominee Ahn Cheol-soo plans to resume campaigning on Saturday after a funeral procession is held for a bus driver who died while working for his campaign. Kim Hyun-sung brings the updates.
Justice Party candidate Sang-jung's campaign team targeted Pohang City in Gyeongsang-buk-do province on Friday. After starting her campaign trail in the southwest Honan region, the liberal stronghold, Shim and her team have spent the past 2 days in the more conservative southeast. In Pohang, she visited workers at steelmaking giant POSCO.
POSCO is being pointed out as one of the sites associated with industrial accidents. In the last 3 years, 21 people have died and 16 of them were subcontract workers.
Her move is part of efforts to garner votes from the working class and ordinary citizens. While promising to improve the working environment, she criticized POSCO's plan to set up a holding company in Seoul. She called it an ungrateful decision that disregarded the sacrifices of Pohang citizens, and one that goes against efforts for the balanced development of the country. Meanwhile, candidate Ahn Cheol-soo from the People's Party spent Friday morning paying his respects at the funeral of a deceased campaign worker. His campaign has been on hold for 3 days, after 2 campaign workers died on the campaign trail in Cheonan due to suspected carbon monoxide poisoning. Friday morning was the last farewell ceremony for the late regional election commissioner.
I, Ahn Cheol-soo, will not bend to any turmoil. I will do my best to follow through with the will of our late companion. I will never bend.
Ahn's next stop on Friday was a hospital in Wonju, Gangwon-do province, where he visited a bus driver who is currently unconscious following a similar incident. Ahn will resume campaigning on Saturday, after the funeral procession held for the bus driver who died in Cheonan ends. Ahn on Saturday will be volunteering at a COVID-19 center in Seoul's Junggu district as his first move returning to the action. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
The Beijing Winter Games are now entering its final weekend with the closing ceremony slated for Sunday. Despite the speed skating team's efforts, South Korea didn't grab medals tonight, but hopes are high for Saturday's mass start. Our Olympics correspondent Han Sung-woo has the details.
In perhaps the quietest day for Team Korea at Beijing 2022 so far, speed skaters Cha Min-kyu and Min-seok on Friday finished 18th and 24th each in the men's 1,000 meter. Repeating their feats from Pyeongchang 2018, Cha won silver in the 500 meter and Kim bronze in the 1,500 meter in Beijing. So expectations were high, but the two finished more than 2 seconds slower than Thomas Krol of the Netherlands, who took gold with a time of just under 1 minute and 8 seconds. Coming Saturday afternoon, though, in a different speed skating event, is South Korea's likely last chance at a medal this Games. The mass start. Chung Jae-won, this time as a strong medal candidate and not a pacemaker like he was 4 years ago, will be skating alongside defending Olympic champion Lee Seung-hoon in the men's semifinals starting at 4. Park Ji-woo and Pyeongchang 2018 silver medalist Kim Bo-rum, meanwhile, will be competing in the women's semis taking place 45 minutes later. Before the mass starts, Team Won Yun-jong and Team Seok-jin will be competing in bobsleigh's 4-man event. Heat 1 slated for 10:30 in the morning. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
The IAEA will neither approve nor oppose the planned release of treated water from the Fukushima nuclear plant. That's according to its Deputy Director General Friday, after wrapping up the first 5-day safety review in Japan. Lady Everton said it should be up to the regulations of each country to make the decision. However, the IAEA task force assured they will listen very carefully to concerns surrounding the plan, as neighboring countries like South Korea and China expressed strong opposition. The controversy comes as Tokyo decided to discharge water from the plant containing radioactive elements like tritium into the ocean. South Korea successfully tested a light-armed helicopter to see if it can properly function in extremely low temperatures. The evaluation program, which took place in Canada over the course of several weeks, proved the new homegrown chopper can withstand Arctic conditions. Bae Eun-ji has the full story.
A helicopter flies over snow-covered terrain. This light-armed helicopter developed by South Korea completed its low-temperature test flight in Yellowknife, Canada, on the edge of the Arctic, where the average temperature in winter drops to -32 degrees Celsius. Seoul's Defense Acquisition Program Administration said on Friday that the 9-week evaluation program confirmed that it has the capability to withstand extreme cold. Around 165 items were evaluated by carrying out some 40 test flights. This included the soaking test, to check that the helicopter's engine and other equipment can function properly after being exposed to temperatures of -32 degrees for 12 hours. These new choppers, developed to protect air assault units and destroy enemy tanks, will be equipped with homegrown air-to-land guided missiles, 20mm machine guns, and 70mm rockets. Korea Aerospace Industries started developing the LAH in 2015 and unveiled its first prototype in 2018. 2 years later, it passed the suitability test.
The LAH had already passed the suitability test, which checked its ability, load requirements, and vibrations. The purpose of this low-temperature test is to see if it can work properly at -32 degrees or in conditions like at around plus or -3 degrees. Once this is done, almost 96 or 97% of the development is complete.
If all goes well, the new aircraft will be certified ready for operational use and will finish development by the end of 2022. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
The bitter cold wave will temporarily subside until tomorrow. Cloudy skies will take over in the capital region with highs hovering around 3 degrees Celsius. This mild trend won't last too long. On Sunday, frigid conditions will return, with readings in the negative territory for the entire day. Meanwhile, dry conditions are intensifying across eastern regions and the surrounding areas. Almost half of the country is currently under a dry weather advisory. This includes the Seoul metropolitan area as well. Although light rain is in the forecast for parts of the south, this won't be enough to alleviate the dryness. Please take extra precautions against wildfires. For the morning, Gyeongju and Busan will see a mix of rain or snow. And as for the readings, Seoul will start off at -3 degrees. Daytime highs will hover near the seasonal norms. Gwangju will get up to 5 degrees. Daegu and Gyeongju will be reaching 7 degrees Celsius. After tomorrow, wide temperature gaps are expected. Mornings are forecast to stay frigid until the middle of next week. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
It's time to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.